The story of the Society of St. Pius X has become a singular and decisive moment for the future of the Church. It's not just consecrations that are being discussed here. Authority itself is being put to the test, and what is emerging could mark a before and after. The situation isn't new, but today, with the episcopal consecrations announced but not yet approved, we've entered a different phase, more tense, more exposed, more dangerous. On February 3rd, and again on February 23rd, Bishop Joseph Strickland broke a silence that, in his view, is no longer sustainable. He wrote clearly, "The Vatican's silence is not neutrality. It's already a decision. When for months you listen to requests made respectfully, calmly and insistently, and never receive a clear answer, the delay itself becomes a response." This is where the issue changes tone, because we're not just talking about an irregular canonical reality. We're talking about sacramental continuity. Without new bishops, priestly formation cannot continue. Without bishops, there is no valid ordination of new priests. Without priests, sacramental life wanes. This isn't polemic, it's ecclesial structure. Strickland recalls a simple principle. The unity of the Church is not preserved by ambiguity. Authority is given not merely to govern, but to safeguard what has been handed down. And when ambiguity persists, the risk is not peace, but the silent erosion of trust. But tensions have grown even more with the intervention of Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who has made a direct appeal to Pope Leo XIV. This is not an academic analysis, an appeal, a fraternal but firm invitation to grant the apostolic mandate for the episcopal consecrations of the fraternity. The moment is being described as truly providential. These are weighty words, because they imply that this isn't just a problem to be managed, but a historic transition to be made. Schneider denounces what he calls the emergence of new quasi-dogmas. According to this approach, the Pope's consent to episcopal consecration is by divine right, and a consecration without such consent, or even against a papal prohibition, would automatically constitute a schism. But is it really that simple? Schneider recalls that in the first centuries, episcopal consecrations did not take place with formal papal permission as we understand it today. Remember that the Code of Canon Law of 1917 did not provide for automatic excommunication for a consecration against the will of the Pope, but rather suspension. It even recalls the case of Saint Athanasius, who in 357 disobeyed Pope Liberius in a context marked by rampant Arianism. The history of the Church is more complex than the formulas that today are transformed into slogans. And this is where the issue broadens, because we're not just discussing a legal act, we're discussing a wound that, according to Schneider, has been burning for over 60 years. A wound made up of doctrinal and liturgical ambiguities. The Second Vatican Council is not accused of heresy. The charge is different: ambiguity. And when a doctrinal development seems to contradict what preceded it, or requires decades of theological gymnastics to be reconciled with previous magisterium, the question becomes inevitable. Is it a development or a disguised rupture? In this framework, the fraternity is described not as rebellious, but as an entity that insists on continuity. According to Schneider, it would be almost the only major ecclesial body to openly denounce the existence of ambiguous elements in some conciliar declarations and in the Novus Ordo Missae. One might disagree with this interpretation, but ignoring it doesn't erase it. Tensions rise when an uncomfortable comparison is brought up. The Holy See has shown notable flexibility towards the Chinese Communist Party, allowing a mechanism for selecting bishop candidates, while towards the society it maintains a rigidity that appears, to some, disproportionate. This is a serious accusation because it introduces the issue of double standards. And then there is the question of the professio fidei required of the fraternity, including the acceptance of pastoral and non-definitive teachings of the last council and the subsequent magisterium. If this is the so-called minimum requirement, Schneider asks, isn't that not being definitive, being elevated to the rank of definitive? Responsibility, he warns, cannot be unilaterally shifted. If the society were completely cut off, the division would fall primarily on the Holy See. This is a weighty statement because it shifts the center of gravity of blame. And so, we come to the heart of the appeal. Most Holy Father, grant the apostolic mandate for the episcopal consecrations of the fraternity. Distance yourself from partisan pressure. Demonstrate with a paternal spirit that you want to build a bridge. Do not go down in history as someone who failed to do so. Here the scene narrows. It's no longer a theological debate. It's a historical crossroads. Pope Leo XIV faces a choice that cannot be diluted indefinitely. Either grant an apostolic mandate, perhaps as a temporary pastoral measure, to create the conditions for a peaceful dialogue, or maintain silence, allowing tensions to build to the breaking point. Strickland said that silence is already a decision. Schneider called for concrete action. At the center of this is the hierarchical structure of the Church, which by divine institution is not optional. Episcopal consecrations are not private gestures. They are visible signs of communions with the successor of Peter. But unity cannot be built on ambiguity. If authority is called to safeguard what has been handed down, then the question of continuity is not a whim of identity. It is an ecclesial question. The tension of 1988 did not arise in a vacuum. It arose in a context of doctrinal confusion, liturgical experimentation, and pastoral instability. Today, many argue that those dynamics have not been completely overcome. Others, on the contrary, believe that reopening that era means calling into question obedience itself. Yet the question remains unanswered. Is the desire for continuity rebellion or an instinct of faith? This is not a marginal issue because it touches on the relationship between authority and tradition, between development and fidelity, between governance and stewardship. If the bridge is built, this phase will be remembered as a difficult but providential transition. If it isn't built, the fracture risks becoming structural. The history of the Church teaches us that crises aren't resolved with diplomatic formulas. They're resolved with clarity, and clarity sometimes comes at a cost. The time for half words seems to be coming to an end. The decision, whatever it may be, will not be neutral. And when it is taken, it will define not only the fate of a fraternity, but the very image of authority in the Church of our time. The crossroads lies ahead, and it cannot be avoided for much longer. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.